Hey everybody, it's Cathy. Welcome to episode 16 of Mondays on the Mat. I'm coming to you live from my office/yoga room. And today I'm going to be answering Rachel's question, which is why do my wrists hurt after yoga? I love this question, Rachel. Thank you so much for asking. I think it's a really common occurrence to have wrist pain sometimes during yoga or after yoga. And I'm really excited to answer this question. And while I'm talking today, if you have any questions or comments about the wrists or anything else, feel free to put it down there in the comments and I'll be sure to answer you during this episode. Or if you're watching me later, I'll still try to check in and see if I can catch some of those questions and comments. So just wanted to start with a really quick story about wrist pain and to let you know that if you do experience wrist pain in yoga, either during or after, to not let that stop you from doing yoga. So in the late 90s, I started doing yoga like once a week here and there, sort of hit and miss. And then as like 2000 rolled around, I started going real consistently once a week, sometimes twice. And in 2001, I quit the gym and I started doing yoga full time, which for me meant 4 times or more a week. And when I started doing that, all of a sudden my wrists were hurting like so ridiculously bad. I couldn't even lift a frying pan or a pot or anything. It just was incredibly painful. But rather than thinking I can't do yoga or I need to stop doing so much yoga, I realized there was probably something that I needed to be doing differently in order to help that. And so I investigated with my teachers and in my own practice to figure it out. And I'm going to share with you some of those really key findings through my own practice and through my studies as a yoga teacher to help you learn what to do differently to help eliminate or completely reduce or eliminate that wrist pain. So if you were to go online and start Googling like wrist pain and yoga, a lot of articles or things that you would find are going to talk about alignment. And in the weightlifting world, they might call this form, or in dance, probably position. So in yoga, we call it alignment. And we're talking about the optimal placement of your body in any given yoga pose. Know that when we say alignment in any given yoga pose, what we're talking about, or at least I know for sure what I'm talking about, is your skeletal structure. So your skeleton is designed to hold your body. So if you think about alignment, you want to not think about like the muscles and the tissues around the bones, but the actual bones themselves. So for wrist pain, there are so many yoga poses we're going to do with our hands on the ground. Anything from a tabletop to a half plank, a full plank, down dog, handstands, arm balances. There's all of these things with the hands on the ground. So the first piece of the puzzle, and hint, hint, there's more than one piece. It's not just alignment. So don't give up on me yet thinking I'm just going to tell you how to align and then you can be out of here, okay? Because there are 2 key pieces, and I think it's the second piece that most people are missing that causes the pain. So first I want to talk about just general poses where an instructor might say place your shoulders on top of your wrists, or sometimes they'll say it the other way around, place your wrists underneath your shoulders. So skeletally speaking and alignment speaking, we're talking about the center of the shoulder over the, let me get on my knees, the center of the shoulder over the center of the wrist. Now, first of all, you can see the arm isn't necessarily straight, and that can throw some things off. And then I think also what I see a lot in my classes is when I say the center of the shoulder, most people are thinking more of this armpit area, or where the top of so the shoulder starts there and creases into the armpit. And so I see a lot of people placing the center of their palm underneath their armpit. Check out this neat trick I have. I'm going to take a yoga strap and place it in the center of my palm. And I'll wrap that up and over my wrist to my shoulder. And if I go from the armpit to the center of the wrist, you're going to see that now I've got a diagonal line. And in order to undiagonal that line, I'm going to have to move my hand closer into the center line of my body. Did you see that? So from armpit to center of wrist, you get a diagonal. unless you pull the arm in. So now if I take my arm straight forward from there and place my hand in extension, we do any sort of yoga pose where the elbows need to bend, and I pull my hand back. What I'm going to get is, number one, you see the shoulder lifting, and almost my entire hand is underneath, sorry everybody, my boob. But even if the hands were lower, I would have at least half of my hand and my thumb under my rib cage. So what happens is, I don't know if you can really see it from that angle. So what happens is if my hands are too close together, number one, it's pushing my shoulders in and up, and you can see, there it is. See that strain running down my forearm right into, boom, the outer edge of the wrist. So to make sure that you have aligned, first of all, shoulders over wrists, you want to take the center line of your shoulder and place it over your wrist and get that same straight line. So now you can see I don't need to move my arm in or out to get the straight line. It's straight from the shoulder head. And now if I were to take my arm forward, place my hand into extension, and draw the elbow back, I'm going to get a little bit of thumb for me under my boob, but not my whole hand. And if I slide my hands down to rib cage for poses like chaturanga or things like that, I'm really not going to touch. Now I understand everybody's external body is different, so you may get a little bit of visual placement that looks different. But the easiest trick is to play around with that strap. You can do it in a mirror, show up early for a class, have your teacher help you out, have a friend help you out to figure that out. So that's step number one. Step number two is the alignment of what I call the wrist crease. So when you take your hand into extension, I know we want to call this a flexed hand, but just quick anatomy lesson from anatomically neutral. Flexion is when the body parts move towards the back of the body, and I said that backwards. You guys. Flexion, scratch that. Flexion is when you move towards the front of the body. So your wrist flexed is like that. Extension is when the hands move, or the body parts move back. And so that is wrist extension. And so when the wrist is in extension, what I advise people to do, and this is hard to show, is that this crease of your wrist is parallel with the front edge of your mat. So not hands turned in and not hands turned out, but that nice straight line. So come on down to the floor with me where we can look at that a little bit closer. So, right, alignment key number one, center of shoulder over center of wrist, and wrist crease parallel with the front edge of your mat. So again, you don't want a hand that's turned in because that places too much pressure on the inside of the wrist, and you don't want a hand that's turned out. Oh, you can see it really good there. A deep crease on the outside of the wrist, which becomes really painful. So we've got that first key, alignment. So I've got shoulders over wrists, and my wrist creases parallel to the front edge of my mat. Here's where the second key to eliminating wrist pain comes in. Right now I'm kind of pressing my hands into the floor. Watch what happens when I don't. And I want you to look really carefully at my fingers on both hands. Here I am pressing even just a little into the floor, and here I am not. Can you see how there starts to be a little bit of gap underneath my fingers? So the second key to eliminating wrist pain is engaging muscles. I think of it as alignment and engagement. So the engagement in your arms and hands is that you're pressing the hands into the floor. You're squeezing your tricep muscles into the bone and pressing right here at the base of your first finger, feeling like you could crinkle your mat between your hands. And if I turn to the side or on a diagonal, just so you can see this a little bit more, watch both hands and watch my tricep. Here I go when I disengage. You'll see my arms roll out and my hands get light on the floor. A little bit of space under my hands. And then when I engage, press down, squeeze in. Look at that tricep muscle is engaged and the hands are flat, firm. I'm pressing really hard. So when we're in a yoga class and now we're on our hands and knees, or we're even in, there's a table behind me, or we're in plank pose and we start to move around, there's a lot of elbow bending down towards the floor. And if I'm aligned but not engaged, watch what happens with my hands as I lower down to the ground. Can you see that? I'm going to step a knee in so I can show you. The inner edge of the hand completely lifts off of the floor, and all of the weight is going down into the outer edge of the wrist. Ouch, bad, like really hardcore ouch. So in order to prevent that, like I said, you've got to press down right into this knuckle of your first finger. That way, as you lower to the ground, or even halfway, the hands stay flat. Watch again the difference. Disengaged, aligned, perfectly aligned. I'm perfectly aligned, but I'm not engaged. Watch what happens. The hands cup, all of that weight going into the outer wrist. And it feels really hard, by the way. It feels like I'm working hard. I'm just not working the most, what's a good word for that? It's not working the best muscles, really. So when I engage and press down and lower down, watch the hands stay flat. I'm still working hard, but the weight is more evenly distributed and I'm not crunching everything down into the wrist. And so that's going to hold true whether you're in a tabletop or a downward facing dog or any other pose generally where the hands are on the mat. Of course, there are some yoga poses. Let's go back up. There's going to be some yoga poses where we're going to ask for a different alignment in the hands, and then that'll change the engagement as well. But that's really sort of the general alignment and engagement of shoulders and wrists to help eliminate wrist pain. So there's my answer to your question, Rachel. Thank you so much for asking. And if you have any questions about yoga, whether it is an alignment and engagement question, a philosophy question, an energy question, please ask me either in the comments here, over on my YouTube channel, or if you're someone who takes class with me, ask me live in class, and I will be sure to answer you on an upcoming episode of Mondays on the Mat. See you live in class this week, Tuesdays at 6:30, Wednesday at 5:30, Friday at 9:30, and Saturday at 9, or over here on Mondays on the Mat next week. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. Namaste.